Hey friends, it's Holly from Happy Quilty People. Thanks for joining me today. Today I want to tell you about a new block of the month that's happening, and I will have a whole playlist of tutorials for you here on the Happy Quilty People channel on YouTube. But there's also a more in-person component to this coming in February 2026. If you're in Arizona, I can get you details about the actual in-person meetings that are happening. But if you are in the online space somewhere else in the world, or maybe you're even in Arizona and you just want to be online, you're always welcome to join us for a live here on YouTube. I'm looking forward to this project, so let me tell you about it. How did this project get started? Have your friends ever encouraged you to come along into something that was going to be exciting and fun, and you knew they were completely dragging you toward like trouble? Yes, this is where we are. So I have an amazing group of artist friends in the Artsy Girl Gang on Facebook. You are welcome to follow along and find them. That's where you will be able to sign up. There is a very low cost fee for this, just to help pay for the time and admin effort that goes into this. What else? As far as the YouTube bit, your likes and follows and shares help me monetize the channel, and I appreciate all of that. So what our idea is one of our friends wanted to do Jen Kingwell's Boho Heart quilt pattern. She has loved this pattern for a long time. And this is the image that's on, I guess, the front of the pattern. Since this time, she's come out with her own line of fabrics, and I think they are much more fun than this. I'd saved some Jen Kingwell patterns onto my Pinterest boards, but what they looked like were the ones that were very scrappy, and they had a lot of black and white in them, little stripes, little black and white zings and pops. I just loved the way those looked. And so those were the ones that I saved. But when I started looking at this Boho Heart pattern, I really, really felt like it needed to be pink. And for me, that's a Valentine pink. So you can see over here, this was kind of the color I was thinking. I really wanted it to be a pink heart. Now, this pattern, you can do in any color of the rainbow that you like. In fact, I've actually seen it done with a graduated rainbow, like kind of diagonally across the whole heart. And it looked fabulous. You can make whatever colors you want. If you wanted to do blue and white, if you wanted to do maybe black and white with a pop of red, like the sky's the limit. You can do anything you want. If you wanted to pick a certain fabric designer and focus on using their products, their fabrics, you totally could. It would be great in Tilda or Tula Pink or even Kafe, although I'm going to talk about the scale of the prints that you use. So I'm not sure he's ideal for this, but you could make him work. Anyway, so I had seen a pink heart and knew that was kind of where I wanted to go, except I knew that if I had ever done a Jen Kingwell quilt, I wanted to do it in that scrappy way that she has, that I like so much. I was puzzling. What am I gonna do? Am I gonna go to the fabric store, find a whole new bunch of fabrics? Like, what do I need to do? And I thought, okay, I've just organized my fabrics when I was going through a color wash quilt. Like, I have so many fabrics, I need to use some of them. And I knew that I had some fabrics that I thought would make a fun, just that happy style that Jen Kingwell uses in her fabrics. And I knew that I had some, so I wanted to go pull them out. And so what I did on Sunday morning was I just started to pull out my pinks, and I had a whole bunch of them. I bought these 3 or 4 knowing that I really liked them and that maybe this pink quilt was coming up. So I got half yards of those. And then the rest of these pinks are just what I had in my stash. And then beside them, I started laying out some of the other things that I thought would be fun. Jen Kingwell uses actually lots of like little geometrics, and that's a good one. I have a feeling if she went to a flea market. Jen Kingwell might look at like the mid-century stuff, maybe some things that are more like that. Anyway, I just think she picks what makes her happy, and those are the designs that she's put into her fabrics. And so while I love her fabrics, I didn't happen to have any in my stash, and I just thought I need to use a little bit of what I've got. And so this is what I've come up with. Before I forget, I need to let you know, Jen Kingwell does do a lot of hand piecing and hand sewing. This block of the month and this pattern is specifically for machine piecing. If you love to paper piece, I bet that you could go to Etsy and buy someone's pattern that they have already made the paper piecing, pattern for. So that's a possibility too. You will need to buy the pattern. It is a booklet. There are a lot of pieces in this quilt, but we're gonna spread it out over a year. So I think it will make a fun sew along. And the best part is that you'll get to spend some time with some online friends as you sew. And there'll be tutorials to help you in case you get stuck. I wanted to give you a couple of ideas. If you're thinking that you might like to join this sew along or maybe do this quilt, but you're feeling a little nervous, this quilt is listed as an intermediate quilt. The first time I looked at it, I thought, there's no way that's an intermediate quilt. But the more I look at it, yeah, I can see that. And by the time you break it down block by block, bit by bit, it's gonna take some time to tackle, but we're gonna spread it out over the course of a year. And I think it'll come together nice and easy. I do have some thoughts if you are a beginner quilter, where you might want to land with this. If you are a beginner quilter, instead of, let's see, I haven't shown this picture yet. Instead of piecing in this more complicated way, this is a sampler quilt. It's all about learning new block designs. Instead of piecing in this complicated way, what you may want to do is just use solid pieces of fabric. Piece the ones you want, and if you don't want to piece it, if it seems too complicated or you're just over it that month, maybe life gets a little complicated and so you're ready for a break that month, you can just make fabric blocks that are the same size and sew it together as if it was just all patchwork. If you feel like this is super busy, busier than you'd like, again, patchwork might be an option for you. Not trying to change Jen Kingwell's patterns, but just to give you some options so that this would be a doable pattern for you if you needed to modify for yourself a little bit for any reason. I wanted to say, if you really think that this pattern is outside of your scope, something that you can do is Marcus Fabrics at marcusfabrics.com has a free pattern that's hearts that are strip pieced, and the pattern name is Aunt Grace Goes Scrappy. So if you just wanted to have a different pattern that was something all on your own, you could. So our blocks are gonna range in size from just slightly smaller than this to about this size. So that's a huge difference, huge variance. That's why I am picking things that are very small scale prints. So if I've got a small piece of fabric, that makes sense. If I wanted to do patchwork and have like a giant flower, you could. I love the giant flowers. So there's the giant flower piece. But if all of your fabric was giant flowers and you were doing all of the piecing, you're just going to lose that. You're gonna get a little piece of that doesn't look like anything. So I think you need to stick to small scale prints. Okay, let me take the phone down to the fabrics and tell you a few things about the fabrics that I've picked. If you like this fabric layout, you could certainly use this in any other quilt that you wanted to. And I'll tell you about my inspiration and how it hit me. So Sunday morning, I laid out some of my pinks just to see kind of what I had. So I bought a couple of sort of the vintage 30s and 40s kinds of things. I when I'd find a fat quarter I liked, I'd buy it. I'd bought one fat quarter bundle. And the rest of these were just things I picked up along the way that I liked. Maybe some things that were on sale. And then I knew that I liked the scrappy look. And so I started pulling some colors that I thought would go nicely with pinks. So you can see that if I imagine kind of a box of like 5 crayons, I've got the lighter toward pastel versions of those things. It's not a super soft. I do have some darker blues. I have a turquoise and a jade. So I just kind of pulled some of these out. And the only thing I pulled out that I really was absolutely like, no way, was I had a bright red fabric. These have touches of red, but not just a solid red to them. That was the only thing I took out. A thing I like about Jen Kingwell's that I know I will maybe actually struggle to piece is that she likes black and whites in hers, and they are such a little zing pop moment in the quilt, and I love them. So I'm going to try to do that. I do have one that was a black with a pink dot that I thought could be interesting on that. And then for backgrounds, I've got some things, I've already kind of pulled this out of my stash that it's to go with another quilt. But I think you'll find that if you're using low volume, light colors for your background, you'll find that they're either a white background or a cream background. And so you'll want to pay attention to kind of which color grouping you have going on. You absolutely do not have to have a white or light background. We saw a gorgeous one on Pinterest that has like an eggplant purple background. It was gorgeous. Anyway, the way that I came to kind of decide on this was I was just had this out on my table, and kind of every time I walked by it, I would look at it and think, oh yeah, do I like it? Do I not like it? And then what was actually sitting on the corner of my table was a block of fabrics that I bought. Someone in one of my sewing groups was kind of having a little garage sale clean out and selling some of her stuff. And so I bought this. This is actually called, is it Kath or Kathy Holden's? I don't know. Flea Market Mix. And so she's had this in her stash for a few years. I was able to find a little of it online when I looked. This isn't particularly Valentine-y, but it is flea market. There's some prints with buttons, little florals with birds, more florals, just some very fun. It's almost like the vintagey romantic Valentine fabric prints that you see. And so this was laying here, and I finally realized, oh wait, this matches what I'm doing. I think I'm on the right track. And so what I decided to like call this was my Flea Market Valentine fabrics. So mostly pinks, lighter versions of some basic colors, yellow, green, blue. Maybe some things that are a little toward mint and some things that are a little toward turquoise, black and white. And I still haven't decided what I'm gonna do for my background fabrics. I did also notice that I had some things that were very pink, but that they had a lighter background to them, a white background, lots of sort of little ditzy flowers or calico flowers in this mix. And I feel like those could be used to give some contrast. As you're picking out your colors, you're going to need to have some contrast. So if I decide that my block would look best with some contrasting colors, I can use a darker blue or a darker green. Those would give me some dimension, some definition, because if I'm going to go to the trouble to do all of this piecing in the Boho Heart quilt, I want to make sure that people can see it. I did want to mention that if you would like to repurpose any fabrics for this, I do have a couple of shirts on hand that I've thrifted that I think would be cute with this color palette. Let's get that picture out of there. This would be cute with this color palette. I saw in my stash a blue and a white, except that this is a seersucker, and that's gonna pucker a little bit. You are not going to want to use any difficult fabric with this quilt because your piecing is going to be need to be so precise
Not that it's not doable, but you just don't want to give yourself any more headaches than you need to. So you wouldn't want a seersucker, no flannels, no velvets, not even any denims, because some of these pieces, for example, this kind of a block is going to have a lot of little seams behind that block. And you wouldn't want the thick denim to be a part of that. We want things to lay as flat as they can. I'm going to give you tips and tricks as we go along for making the sewing easy. There's a little bit of applique. When we get to applique, I'm going to tell you 3 different ways to do it to make it easier for you. So don't sweat that at all. We're not going to make it hard. We're going to make this quilt easy and doable so we get it done, and then we can say that we have done the epic Boho Heart quilt.